Hello, hi, my name's Nathan. Welcome to the channel. If you don't know, I'm a UK trained doctor who's moved from the UK to New Zealand and have been working here for about 4 months, I would say. So yeah, time has flown by. I've already done a video on some of the differences between working in the UK NHS and here in New Zealand. But in this video, I kind of just want to talk about some of the other differences that are there. There's quite a lot, to be fair. So without further ado, the first one I'm going to touch on is pay. Everyone loves to talk about pay, and I think an obvious difference between here and the UK NHS is the fact that in the UK you get paid once a month on the 25th, 26th or 24th. And here in New Zealand you get paid twice a month, which is good, so once every 2 weeks. So yeah, it is technically the same amount that you would be paid in a month split into two, but it's just a really nice feeling, you know. You're working quite a busy week and you know that next Wednesday you're going to get paid and then your bank account's going to go up and it's great. So yeah, I think mentally it's just quite nice to know that you're being paid quite frequently. And then kind of moves on to my next point, which is there's some really cool concepts here in New Zealand that I would love to see in the NHS. Which pays into the fact that you get paid once every two weeks, and that is the role of cross cover. So there's a couple differences. There's quite a lot of differences in the structure of sort of working in a roster between here and the UK NHS, and one of them is cross cover. So what is cross cover? So essentially, let's use the example of my current team. So I'm in orthopedics. There's 3 doctors, 3 house officers. So that's F1, F2 or F3 working on the ward, and if one of them is sick or away on leave and they haven't been able to fill that place, they will ask you, are you happy to do cross cover? And that means basically you do your own role that you would do traditionally on that day, and then you also take on that role of your colleague who's not there for whatever reason. You can also split your cross cover, so there are 3 of us on the ward. If one of us isn't there, the 2 of us left can take on that role and share the cross cover. And what does that mean? Well, per day of cross cover, like a standard day, I would typically be paid $300 for doing a cross cover, in addition to what I'm being paid anyway. And if you share it, of course, you split the cross cover. Now, I think that's a really great concept. I feel like in the UK, quite often, if someone's ill or away and they haven't been able to find a replacement, quite often you just have to shoulder the extra work, and it's quite convoluted or hard to get any financial reward or anything like that. I think some exception reporting can sometimes yield something, but most of the time it's quite a convoluted process. Here it's very easy. Essentially you sort of fill out a sheet every 2 weeks, which comes back to the 2-week payday, and you submit it on the Friday before the Wednesday of the payday, and yeah, you don't have to keep a log for the entire month, and you get paid your own pay that you're expecting to get paid, and then all the extra sort of cover. So for instance, the last week that I was working, there was actually an unusual level of sickness. So there was sickness on the ward, and then the person who was meant to be covering was also sick. So I was cross covering for 2 of the days fully and 1 of the day half. So yeah, it was a fairly busy week, but I think I made quite a good amount of money and was financially rewarded for doing that. When I say I've made, I don't get paid until this Wednesday, but yeah, assuming that I submit, or anyone submits their extra work schedule onto the rota the Friday before the week of payday, then every 2 weeks you'll get your pay and the extra pay. And I think that's a really good concept, and I think that's something that is nice, because you feel like, yeah, you are actually working harder because you're covering someone else's shifts, but at least you're getting financially rewarded for it. Now, that kind of lends on to another key difference, which I would again love to see in the NHS, and that's relievers. So in the UK NHS in New Zealand, you have, say, us 3 doctors on orthopedics, then you have the doctors on general surgery, and then you have a group of doctors called relievers. I like to think of it as a pool of doctors. And the reason why is if you request leave, say 6 weeks in advance, they will take one of those relievers and say, during this week that this person's taking leave, you'll be doing orthopedics, for instance. So that means that I feel from our perspective, it's much easier to get leave, because the hospital knows that they have a group of doctors to rely on to fill in your position on the time that you're requesting leave. But equally, if someone's sick on the day and they need to fill in that role quite acutely, they usually have some doctors from that pool to move around the hospital to fill in those gaps as much as possible. Now, it's not always perfect because sometimes there's a lot of sickness and there's not enough of those relievers, or some of those relievers are away, or some of those relievers themselves are sick. But in those cases, at least you have that cross-cover concept that I had sort of mentioned earlier to rely on. So in the cases where you don't have someone to come and sort of help out in the team when that role is unfilled, at least you'll be financially rewarded by taking on the extra work with the cross-cover concept. And I think, yeah, relievers are great. So like I said, it means that you're probably more likely to get, or you are more likely to get your leave approved as long as you submit it in advance, which is sort of the case anywhere. Here in New Zealand, because there are some doctors to automatically be pulled away to fill in your role, but it also means that the burden on the team is often not too bad because there is often someone to come and fill that role that's sort of empty. Or even if it's a busy day and there's sort of all the positions are filled, so no one's sick and no one's away, and there's all the relievers, or some of the relievers are without a sort of particular area, they go on float. So they basically send in the WhatsApp chat for the hospital saying, send jobs, and they help out the teams that are under the highest burden. And again, that's not something that you'd have, or traditionally have, at the hospital I was working at in the UK NHS. And I think these are concepts that would be great to see in the NHS. Anyway, I rambled on that for a bit, but I think it's just great concepts here in New Zealand. I think what I want to do in the next couple of videos is talk about some of the differences in living between the two countries, because there are certainly quite a lot of things. But also I kind of want to hear about sort of the differences that any of you have faced from working, not necessarily as a doctor, but just generally between two different countries. So yeah, write it down in the comments below, or have a thought about it. It's quite an interesting thing to think about. Particularly about, if you're doing it yourself, sort of how far you've come and adjusted to a new system, and some of the really cool things and less cool things about working in the new environment. So thank you for watching. See you next time.